Okay, welcome everyone. Miles, can you please confirm you have a quorum? Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the State Licenses and Permits Committee of Community Board 5. I'm Janice Young, your committee chair, and we'll go around the room to introduce ourselves, starting with my vice chair, Miles.
I'm Miles Kerwin. Thomas Ricardo. Seth Woodin.
Libby Hutton,
Samir Levingia.
Sachi Takahashi Ryle.
And the people online.
You're on Noni Victor.
Todd Shapiro.
Great, thank you. So we have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First is a new liquor license application for 31 Union Square West for SPH Manhattan LLC, doing business as State of Play, for which we received the signed and agreed upon affidavit this morning. So we will briefly review that and vote to accept it. I'll explain the new process in more detail shortly. Second, our Assistant District Manager, Josh Hughes, will give a report on a meeting he had with the Department of Transportation regarding the dining out program. And third, we have an update on our research initiative to inform revision to the CB5 cannabis guidelines. Hey, Catherine. Okay, is there anyone attending that has any other business for the committee other than the items on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand in person or virtually using the raise hand button. Okay, seeing none. New business is closed. We'll now move on to our agenda items. So as a reminder to all attendees, our meetings usually flow as follows. For any applications, I'll ask the applicant to introduce themselves. I'll then turn the meeting over to a committee or staff member to present the application or topic. After that, if applicable, I'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak. At this point, members of the committee can ask questions and make comments by raising their hand and waiting to be recognized. After that, I'll give the public the opportunity to comment, again, by using the raise hand button. Once they are recognized, we'll ask them to turn on their camera, unmute themselves, state who they are and the relevance to the topic, and give their comment. After that, I'll put the committee into business session, during which only the committee will discuss the topic. At that point, no further input from the applicant or the public is appropriate unless requested by the chair. During the business session, the committee will discuss the topic. There may be a motion and the committee will take a vote. The vote of this committee will be our recommendation to the full board of CB5, which will meet on Thursday, March 13th. Please check our website for more information. And the vote of the full board will be CB5's position on the topic. So with that, we'll move on to our first item, which is a new liquor license application at 31 Union Square West for SPH Manhattan LLC, doing business as State of Play. So before we begin, for those wondering why we're hearing this application when an affidavit has already been signed as part of new efforts to improve transparency across our board, we will now hear any application that results in an opinion being made from our board, which includes applications where an agreement could not be reached, as we have been doing historically, as well as those where an agreement was reached as documented in the affidavit. So our due diligence process will not change. And as part of that, we will still attempt to facilitate community meetings prior to our SLAP committee hearings, as the former is more conducive to having the sorts of discussions and back and forth that we always hope will lead to an agreement and good starting relations between an applicant and the community. The only difference is we will now present the results of those discussions at committee. So it's easier for everyone to stay informed of outcomes, and we can get a vote to ratify the agreements being made. Any questions about that before we proceed? Okay, great. So seeing that there are no attendees, Miles, would you like to go ahead and present the application?
Yes. So the application is for 31 Union Square West, doing business as State of Play or Flight Club, which I'll explain a bit. The location is 16th Street and Union Square West, right off Union Square. The building is a mixed-use building with residents right above the establishment. So the concept is a darts bar, essentially, in which the majority of the customers are going to book a dartboard for a set period of time. And they have, this company, State of Play, has multiple locations throughout the US, and this is their first NYC establishment. So it'll still be a restaurant with full kitchen, full menu, 2 patron bars, have about 11,000 square feet across the ground floor, mezzanine floor, and the basement level. So it's a fairly large space. And we reviewed the application because it is a large space. It's in a residential area. There are residents right above the establishment. And the neighbors were concerned about a large bar opening up with later hours in a residential area. So we held a community meeting in mid-February that was very constructive. The neighbors and the applicant ultimately agreed to the following. So hours are gonna be indoor closing at midnight, Sunday through Thursday, 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, consistent with our community standards. And then outdoor will close at 10 p.m. 7 days a week. And the property is not subject to the dining out program. The music will be recorded music and with a DJ playing at background sound level. No live music or dancing. There will be no promoters or promotional events, no outdoor wait lines, and the applicant has agreed to employ private security outside to ensure orderliness. And phone number was provided for a hotline for any neighborly concerns. So the affidavit has been signed and distributed to neighbors. Anybody have any questions?
How many people, sorry if you said this, how many people were at the community meeting who like wrote in with comments, just generally?
Maybe 6 to 8.
Can you just repeat the hours? I couldn't hear that. That the hours that were agreed to?
Yep, the hours are going to be closing time of midnight, Sunday through Thursday, and then 2 a.m. Friday through Saturday indoors, and closing at 10 p.m. 7 days a week outdoors.
What was that Sunday? Outdoors is what?
Outdoors closing at 10 p.m. 7 days a week.
Wonderful. So that's in compliance with our standards.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so my question is not to introduce new ideas, but to ask, how do we notice this application? Was it standard? Should we assume that it was standard notice? And is there a way to indicate that we notice the public in the affidavit or somewhere there that's appropriate? The idea here is, hey, it is a lot, the occupancy is very high. There is the opportunity for noise filling out into the street. It's a mixed residential area. And you want to be able to at least say to residents, well, we did publicly notice, and we should state that somewhere. I'm not sure where that goes, and that's a little bit new than what we normally do, because it is assumed that we publicly notice.
Yeah, I don't believe we normally include that in our affidavit template, but we certainly could.
Yeah, it's possible. I think the language right now, it states that, you know, the community had concerns about. So it
Yeah.
suggests that they were actually part of the conversation.
Right, and we went through the standard notice, just like any other.
Yeah, so
application
I think
reviews.
there's some other way to try to figure that part out. I just want to make sure that people understand, because you could live in a block your whole life and not understand the process. And the community meeting was basically with residents that live in the building or nearby, or?
Residents that live in the building and a couple buildings nearby. So we did the standard, posted notices on the block for both for comment and then for the community meeting. And then we shared it in our newsletter as well. For people
Thank
that
you,
listen.
right.
I
Okay,
think, since going forward, since we're hearing at committee, we're gonna have to write a reso for every affidavit now. That's something we can definitely include in the reso part.
Reso. And because this is a new applicant, this is a brand new applicant, this is not, a renewal. It gives us an opportunity to do a little bit more to help people understand how we work.
It's not purely residential, right? Because across the street,
Mixed use.
yeah, it's commercial. There's there's a dorm right there too.
Right, there's
Yeah,
that.
NYU dorm, right next to it, yeah.
Yeah, most of the concerns were from the building where the establishment actually is.
Oh, so that is a residential, okay.
Mhm.
No, because I know next door was a commercial.
Yeah.
So
Space
it's
has been
lying there.
vacant for, I think, a few years now. You guys probably know the space if you ever walk by Union Square.
It was a
It's really
seafood
nice.
restaurant. It was like a high-end seafood restaurant.
Right. Really nice outdoor space. It should be.
Yeah, across from, used to be coffee shops across the street, which was a bigger problem.
It's the same space that Chick-fil-A was thinking about going into, maybe, but then.
Really big.
Yeah, it would be a really big space for Chick-fil-A, but.
There had been talk, I think, during the pandemic when something was going in, but there's also a store. Like there's a lot of vacancies in Union Square right now. I'm very alerted to this, so it's a bid needs.
Well, it should bring a lot of people to the area. Any other questions?
I just want to also comment that I think this is a good, this is a consistent move toward transparency, and I want to acknowledge that. And what it also does is it gives more eyes than the few eyes that look at these documents. It gives more eyes a chance to look at it. So if you see something, please say something. Those of us that work on these affidavits are in the wee hours of the morning, but it's an opportunity, but it's well done, it's executed thoughtfully and consistent with what we've done before. And just good to see the transparency.
Oh, I see we have a member of the public now. If you have any questions or comments on this topic, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Well, I guess we can go into business session. Yeah, so again, because we're hearing this application, even though everything's been agreed upon, we are going to write a reso. So in order to do that, we need to make a motion. I don't know if there's additional commentary on this that everyone wants to make.
If not, then I'll motion to deny unless the applicant signs on the affidavit, which they already have.
Second.
Great. Let me take a look.
Libby?
Yes. I'm the top alphabetically. Really?
You are today, yes.
Oh my God, I'm never at the top alphabetically. Oh
First half of the alphabet slacking.
Janice,
my God,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
exciting. Never did that one.
I am a yes.
Middle child forever.
Sachi,
Yes.
Smear,
Yes.
Seth,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Saad,
Yes,
Ron,
Yep, yes.
and Zona.
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes.
Great. Okay, so the office will submit this resolution and affidavit to the SLA. Next up, we have a report on the dining out program meeting held between our office and the Department of Transportation. Presented by Josh.
Sure, so, on February 10th, office staff of various community boards, across Manhattan were invited by the Department of Transportation to attend an update meeting on the dining out program and also, answer any questions that we may have about their process. So this is just a, summary that I've written up, about how that meeting went and about some of the top line items that we've heard from it. I think the key, one of the key points would be, communication of no comment to DOT. Before, this was something that was kind of up in the air to us, but they let us know that for applications that we don't have any comment on, we can, simply submit a no comment through email, on the same chain that they originally emailed the application to us for. The timeline for SLA and DOT applications, one striking thing is applicants are not supposed to apply to the State Liquor Authority, the SLA, for an alteration before they receive a license for their dining out shed from DOT. We've seen a lot of applicants doing this, some even submitting to the SLA before they submit to DOT. The SLA has confirmed that those alteration notices, as well as any comment that we submit, will be held until their dining out license is issued, in which case those comments and those applications will become applicable. If they're renewing their dining out setup, they have to first submit their renewal notice to the community board, similar to liquor licenses. Once they're approved, they're gonna receive their license for dining out by DOT. And they can then send the alteration notice to the community board of the SLA for that portion of their license. DOT and SLA, I asked about this, they maintain very frequent communication. Since they're basically doubling up their work on this in a way. this is to make sure that that process goes a little smoothly, is a little more streamlined and doesn't have as much overlap. For issuance, for inspections and summons issuance, we've got a lot of questions about this, especially from constituents. DOT inspectors have to witness a violation in real time in order to issue the summons. That can include an illegal shed, it can include quality of life issues, whatever it may be. The DOT inspector has to be on site and witness it in order to issue that summons. Obviously, for something like an illegal dining out shed, it's pretty easy to witness because it's a stationary object. But for quality of life concerns, it does get a little bit tougher. However, DOT told us that they do have an after hours enforcement team that will conduct site visits during the weekends and nighttime hours. They will not be conducting inspections based on violations or complaints with their old program, however. So that means that any problems that we may have had with an establishment before the new dining out program went into effect are essentially moot until they are repeated or hopefully not repeated. For compliance materials, we've heard from a lot of applicants. This is something that not just our board, but several other boards have heard and brought up with DOT is that a lot of applicants don't seem to know the rules that DOT has laid out. So they told us that they are going to develop a one-page document outlining key dining out program rules, which was requested specifically by another community board. It'll serve as both a reference for applicants and community stakeholders. We have not heard back on the creation of this document as of yet or the progress towards creating it, but it's something that we will be following up about. Moving on to the community board's roles and limitation for engagement with applicants. Applicants are not required to engage with community boards, and DOT explicitly communicates this to them in their initial documents. We asked DOT that that while this may be part of the rules, that they encourage applicants to engage with us, both as a gesture of cooperation with the community and because they're going to need to engage with us anyways during the SLA process if they want to serve alcohol in their dining out setup. Any feedback that's submitted by the community board serves as recommendation only, of course. We don't have approval or denial authority. However, city council members do have that authority, and they typically give very strong consideration to the community board's opinion. For consideration of quality of life concerns, this was something that virtually all of us asked about. It's been an ongoing issue with these operations. And DOT told us that they do not take noise complaints, prior bad behavior, or any other quality of life concerns into account when reviewing applications, no matter the circumstances. If concerns arise, then we, the board, must address them either through the SLA process by negotiating stipulation agreements, as we've done in the past, or by submitting comments to a city council member. They will not pay, DOT that is, will not pay any attention to quality of life complaints until after they receive their permit. But after they receive their permit, if they do continually receive complaints, that is 3 summonses for the same complaint, their permit can be revoked. And we're going to continue to track establishments internally on the office side for any complaints after their license is granted specifically for this purpose. That includes 311 complaints as well as any comments submitted to the office. And constituents, residents are of course encouraged to submit anything that they see, not just the 311, but also to the office by emailing it to office@cb5.org. For hearing procedures, public hearings and notifications, hearings for the dining out applications must be publicly advertised. This is a lot of information that I personally was wondering, but that was finally delivered to us. Notices are published in the city record and sent to community boards via email. I've had a lot of applicants ask me about where they need to advertise, so it was good to be able to point them in the right direction. Applicants are notified via email of the hearing after the city council review period has concluded. And DOT confirms that all fees have been paid and proper documents have been submitted. It's at the discretion of the community board to determine if a representative should attend and testify, or if written comments, including public feedback, should be submitted instead. So essentially, if we have a dining out application that we have determined to be problematic, and we want to get those, that opinion on the record, that would be a good place to do so, outside of the SLA, process, should we desire. Like they said, it is at our discretion. The process for withdrawal, is pretty simple. They just need to email, applicants just need to email DOT formally to withdraw from the dining out program. DOT does not have to notify us of a withdrawal. We of course ask that they consider that if that case should arise. But the applicant, if they've engaged with us or if we've engaged with them, is likely to inform us directly. Lastly, we talked a little bit about ADA compliance. Of course, all dining out setups must be fully compliant with the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. And while there's no specific rule regarding a service aisle width, the national minimum standard is 12 to 8 inches, which is a little bit slim. Service aisle meaning you've got the table here, and then you've got the service aisle here for servers or employees of the restaurant to walk down and actually serve customers. There's no, like we said, there's no legal standard for what this ought to look like, but the national minimum standard, according to, I don't believe I wrote down the name of the organization, but it's a restaurant advocacy or group, and their national standard is 12 to 8 inches. Future rule updates may address service aisle requirements, meaning we may have a standardized size for service aisles. And if they do introduce such rules, the board will be notified of any proposed changes. And lastly, operators are permitted to temporarily modify their setups as needed to accommodate individuals with disabilities, just so long as the setup is restored after the individual leaves. Meaning, essentially, if you have a sidewalk cafe that's made up of barricades or whatever it may be, if somebody with a disability needs to get in and it's not immediately accessible through the entrance, they can pull those barriers out, let the individual in, and then close them and let them back out in the same manner. And that's totally fine. And that's pretty much all I have, but I'm happy to take any questions. Yes.
So one thing I read in the news, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they have a lot of applications, the DOT has a lot of applications, and they are going to take some time to finish them, like to go through all of them, likely not before April 1st, which is when it's supposed to be. So they're just gonna like let them operate, assuming that they're not, following the rules, even though they don't technically have a license. So in that case, are they able to go to the SLA for their outdoor license, or do they have to wait until they have like an official license from the DOT?
That rule, I believe it was just a couple days ago that came down. I'm not sure exactly how that interacts with the requirement to get their license prior to the SLA process. I would assume that it still applies.
Okay.
But I can definitely ask DOT.
I think also, if I understand the rules correctly, they're actually allowed to notice us, the community board, like 270 days in advance, like similar to liquor and cannabis. But they wouldn't get the alteration until the license is granted.
Yes, they SLA will hold the alteration notice until the license is granted.
Yeah.
But we can notice and collect comment. It
Yeah.
just won't be reviewed until they get the license.
Is it 207?
Do you have a sense of like
Understood.
how they're prioritizing inspections and complaints, given like how many restaurants have these programs? And I'm sure it's like hard to manage their staff, because like in the past, when I like tried to file things on Brew One, it just takes like an infinite amount of time. And I'm just curious if they like are planning on prioritizing like certain noise complaints that they can address in like a relatively timely manner.
I'm not sure, that question wasn't asked, at least not directly like that. I know that anecdotally, when there's been an issue with, a cafe impeding pedestrian flow, they're a little bit more responsive to that. As far as noise complaints, 311 NYPD is typically your go-to, for a quicker response on those. But, the only thing we've heard regarding quality of life concerns is that they're not going to be considered until after the license is granted.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
Can I be recognized?
yeah,
Yeah.
Todd, go.
Okay, are we gonna do like a separate questions and comments, or can I combine it into one?
You can just go ahead.
Okay, first I have a question, which I'd like to hear from Josh. Why is it that there were no community board members invited to this meeting? Then the second question is, how strong was the pushback from our peer community board on some of these critical issues? In specific, not engaging, their DOTs not even being neutral, but apparently, as I read this, it's saying that they're encouraging or creating an atmosphere where the applicants won't engage with the community boards. And then the other thing, again, what was the nature of the pushback? The idea that if there's evidence in the record, even under the old program, they're not going to consider it at all until after the license is granted, right? And then the idea that their administrative discretion as a part of the executive branch of government, that they will not consider any quality of life concerns, and was there pushback on this? I mean, those are all big issues that during the legislative process and the comments that we gave, and then I went to all these hearings, that we were very concerned that the DOT would not be liberal or aggressive in doing this, right? I mean, what was the nature of, was there any pushback from the staff?
So to answer your first question, about, community board members, and being invited to this meeting, we definitely brought that up, and they said that they're going to be putting together, a secondary meeting specifically for community board members, which is something that, we've all been staying pretty on top of. We want to see that actually happen. In terms of, pushback, we definitely, made our positions known that, when they would, like, for example, when they brought up, notifying applicants that they don't need to engage with the community board. There's a significant amount of pushback to that, I would say. We would like to see, whether or not that's required, we would like to see it encouraged, because it, of course, creates a positive atmosphere, between applicants and the community. Several other things, of course, on quality of life, we would like to see, a little bit more proactivity. However, I think that, while, the DOT may not be considering, quality of life concerns during the application process, the SLA definitely will be. So I don't think that those, concerns are going to go completely out the window. It's just going to have to be a different agency that we address them with, at least before they get their license.
Thank you, Josh. So, now onto my comments. So the issue here,
Can I
really-
wait, Todd, can I let Yaron ask the question? Because he's also been waiting before you.
Oh, should I hold your comments for later?
Yeah, sorry, do you mind?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Your
Thank-
Honor, you.
Yeah, thanks, Janice. So Josh, first of all, thank you for going to that meeting. So question, and Janice, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this being an issue, but it was my understanding, and this is based on also a couple of the applications I did, that something that was happening was that we were getting applications or questionnaires from DOT, and supposedly these had already been looked at through the lens of do they comply with DOT's regulations, and we were then looking on top of that of like, okay, so it complies technically with the regulations, but is it good for the community? In doing due diligence, I think we discovered that some of the applications actually did not comply with DOT regulations. Did DOT talk about what that screening process is, and are they going to tighten up on it? And like, where are we in that process? Like when we get stuff from them, have they already vetted it to make sure it complies with their regulations? Because that seems to have been not happening. But Janice, also correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Once it comes to us, the setup or the actual plans should hypothetically be going through, should go through the DOT for confirmation of compliance with their regulations. It's definitely something we've noticed where a lot of, I would say, a lot of our route to comment has been through reconfirming a lot of these concerns, especially around pedestrian flow. Like I said, that's the primary concern that DOT is paying attention to during the application process is, does it impede pedestrian flow? And remind me of the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
There wasn't a second part. It's just more like, so basically, I'm just wondering if this came up. So basically, what should we do if we are looking at these applications, we're trying to put our community, like, look at it, but we discover that it actually doesn't even comply with DOT's regulations? I mean, are we supposed to double check their work on every single one? Like, what do they want us to do when this happens? And like, why does this keep happening, I guess? But if this didn't come up at the meeting, then it didn't come up at the meeting.
Well, this is something that's completely up to our discretion on what we do with them, if we do anything at all. I would say that we've been one of the more proactive boards, on this process.
Thanks to Janice. Thank you, Janice.
Yes. And I know that whenever there's been technical issues, like a form being submitted that's not actually a form, or a form being submitted without a site plan, or the address is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever we've brought these up with DOT, they've typically listened and corrected it. I don't, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we've submitted comment specific to pedestrian flow that was counter to what DOT had found. The majority of the issues that we found have been quality of life issues, ranging from noise to trash accumulation, et cetera, et cetera. Which we've noticed the community about as well, which is where we receive a lot of these complaints, often with photo evidence.
Okay, thank you, Josh.
Yeah. I have a question about the last bullet under consideration of quality of life concerns. So it says, if an establishment gets 3 summonses for the same complaint, and you said a complaint could be a 311 complaint, but this, so if I'm reading this right, it's like, if X establishment gets 3 311 complaints, that doesn't mean that their permit could be revoked. They have to get they have to get 3 summonses, which is a different thing.
Yes.
And so DOT will be doing summonses based on complaints?
They'll send an inspector out, which is at their discretion, of course. But I know that every time I've pushed them to send an inspector to a location, they have.
So a summons is when an inspector goes out.
Summons is a violation that's issued by an inspector to the establishment.
Got it.
Got it. And those are usually, those could be in response, a summon, or sorry, an inspector going out could be in response to 311, things like 311 complaints or staff from the community board flagging something, stuff like that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna say that under the enforcement and compliance, like under bullet point 3, the first bullet point, where it says the DOT inspector has to like physically be there to witness it. Like photo and video aren't enough. They have to like physically witness it themselves
Yes.
in order for it to even be a summons.
Mhm. They're very explicit about that.
Yeah, like you seem to emphasize that a lot, so it seemed like it was maybe discussed a lot.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, any questions from members of the public? Okay, then we'll go into business session and move into comments. Todd, you wanna? Go ahead.
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Can
Yes.
everybody hear me? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so the idea that, first of all, it's upsetting to me that they didn't invite the community board members to something like this to get pushback. I mean, where are the principals? Where are the ones that on key issues like the degree and scope of which the executive branch and the DOT is building out their enforcement philosophy, that we're not there to push back, and then it's left to our administrative staff, it's outrageous, right? So I think we have to insist, it's not enough for them to just give us a flyer, right? We should have had an opportunity to address them directly. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I can't say for sure, but the idea that they're so narrowly construing their DOT is so narrowly construing their administrative responsibility to just do nothing except the letter of the law and ignore the spirit of the law. It's their responsibility. If they get an application where there's a bad actor or there's a history of bad behavior under the old program, to simply ignore it. Now, as a lawyer, I understand that it was a different set of rules, right? And that they don't want to prejudge it or get involved in an argument. But there are certain rules that have been carried over from the old program, particularly with quality of life. That's an abdication of their responsibility to not consider that in some way, okay? Then the other thing is the idea that they take no quality of life concerns into account until after they grant the license. Now, during the discussions and the comment period, they're giving out, I believe, 4-year licenses, right? And it's the history with this kind of thing is once you give out a license, it's almost impossible to take it away. So the idea that, now they're just one piece of the administrative puzzle, but the idea that they're washing their hands of the quality of life issue in tandem with the fact that they're telling or passive aggressively telling the applicants that they don't have to cooperate with us it's just a bad philosophy. And these were concerns that were raised at the very beginning about DOT. I also might add that it's a wish list. A lot of these issues that I'm bringing up, it's like a wish list of what the hospitality and restaurant industry wants. Now, we know from reading the papers that the restaurant industry and the restaurants themselves are obsessed and extremely concerned about the speed and lowering the administrative overhead with getting the license. But what we see is that they're looking in the wrong places, right? I mean, the quality of life oversight and commentary that we're doing, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. They don't have the time or the interest, or as it appears, the philosophy to do it, right? we have to do it. They should be encouraging us to do it and see that it's in their interest to do it. So, you know, these are real substantive issues. I urge my colleagues on the community board to take on the committee to think this through. And I think, look, we're still at an early phase in this whole process, right? But I think as we see this play out, we should report back to the full board, and if necessary, use what influence we have and join with our fellow community board members to push back on this, right? And that's why I was asking Josh about, you know, what the other district managers and staff felt about this, because these are all issues that were of the greatest concern when DOT was picked as the organ of government to manage this. Anyway, think about it. These are my concerns as the former head of the Open Restaurants Task Force.
Thanks, Todd. Any other comments?
Or-
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you're putting it politely. It's pretty clear they're trying to cut the board out. I mean, it's just like, hey, we're gonna explicitly tell people not to engage with the board. That's engagement. That's the first thing it says. That they're explicitly doing. It's the only thing they're explicitly doing. So, you know, I understand that from the note, it says like, hey, the board, the employees turn around and said, no, we really encourage you to tell them that they should engage, but if they're getting explicit, like if the role is to say, we're not doing a lot here, but we're gonna explicitly say you don't have to talk to the board. That's the DOT saying that it is policy that they don't believe the board has a say in putting these licenses. When you explicitly do one thing, which is to say not to talk to someone on a recommendation, it's the only thing they're doing. Like, the rest of it, like, I get what you're saying, but like, this whole thing kind of just looks like, look, we want to find new ways to chip out the community board. If they don't want our input, the resolution, I would say is the DOT doesn't want our input. We'd really like them to actually come out and say it instead of, word around it now. How you word that, put that in a resolution, I don't know, but like, there's not a lot of subtext here, like, let's just be honest and adults, like. It was done, they had people that weren't community board members, they had, staff come in, they talked to them, not the board. They're literally saying, explicitly telling people, the only thing they're explicitly communicating is not that they don't have to engage with us. They might get around to do a one pager to explain the rules though. Like, it's unacceptable. Like, I don't, that's, like at the end of the day, why bother having the applications go to the community board so they can get a rubber stamp and look like they did something? No, I wouldn't. At that point, I would say like, look, if you don't want us to do it, say you're cutting us out of the thing and then understand it that, that's going to be the position. But I think the position has to be that this is nonsense. Like, that's a position we can take is our recommendation is this is unacceptable. Like, I don't know what way we would preferably comment on that, but like, I think you have so many good points, Todd, but like, I think you're underselling how bad they're trying to cut it out. Like, it's a clear, like, I don't know, in corporate world, I'll just be like, all right, they're letting us know, they're saying no. Right?
Thanks, Tom. Samir.
Yeah, I just wanna reread what this says, because it says applicants are not required to engage with community boards, and DOT explicitly communicates that to them. They're not telling them not to talk to us, they're just telling them what the rules are. But I think if we do say anything, it is generally, I think the agency, it just has a job to follow the rules, and the rules were created by the city council.
Correct.
So I think if we want to say anything, I think that what we should be saying is telling the city council to change the rules, not scolding the DOT for just following the rules.
That's fine. And I'm, once again, it's not, I think my comment, and to take a step back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, there's a polite way to say like, oh, I have some concerns with this, where you just turn around. I think this is kind of beyond concern. It's like, look, at the end of the day, why are you even asking us to be involved?
Yeah.
If, and I get what you're saying, Samir, but when they say,
Also, after this, let's not do back and forth.
oh, sorry,
But you can finish your thought.
I apologize, I just. What, like, I want to affirm, because I think everyone's right on it. I'm just saying, like. The whole thing pretty much just says, the only time they were like, hey, we're gonna tell the clients, like, they didn't even confirm that they were gonna give a page of rules. They're like, yeah, we're gonna get around to a page of rules. But we're explicitly gonna tell them they don't have to talk to the community. That is the one thing they communicated, that they will communicate to the applicants, and it's like, then why involve us? Like, and I get you saying like, oh, I understand the comment, well, they didn't say not to talk to them. But when the one thing they tell you, and they explicitly point out they're gonna do is say, you don't have to do something. Hey, here's an application, we're gonna leave a lot of gray room, but the one thing you don't have to do is communicate to the community board. It's
Yeah,
a
I
subtle
mean,
way of
Also,
saying things.
just to be clear about what this communication is, it's basically when the DOT is updating the applicant about the status of their application, they give them like a whole list of things to consider, and one of the bullets on that page is, things like you're not required to communicate with the community board, however, they may reach out to you with questions. So it's not like, I feel like it sounds very pointed right now, like it's a pointed thing that they're told to not do or that they don't have to do, but it is just like something that is mentioned as part of the materials they distribute to applicants. That said, it doesn't, it's still something that is bothersome, and it sounds like not only to us, but other community boards as well. Libby.
I wonder to that end if there's a way to change that sort of template language from like the DOT end where even though it's explicitly stated, like you don't have to do this thing. However, it probably behooves you in your overall application to be a member of the community, that like it is in your interest to be cooperative in some way. Like we encourage you to respond if they've got concerns, especially if you are pursuing like a liquor license, they will also likely be reaching out to you then. That just, they can just keep it purely fact-based. I mean, it's a little bit of advice in there too, but as a fact-based thing, if there's a way to not be like, ignore these people. And I think that sounds, however it's phrased now is, it's giving, ignore them. I don't know.
Any other? Oh, Zena.
I kind of like don't get like as adverse reaction from this like language reading off the page. Like ultimately we are an advisory body and it's certainly in the best interest for applicants to be cooperative with us. To what folks mentioned earlier, I do think it would be helpful if like maybe on our website, when we give applicants guidance around like liquor license applications particularly, to be like explicit that we care a lot about like prior notice complaints, like how cooperative you were in like these DOT related applications. So we have that book there. Particularly since like applicants, like usually at restaurants are always like, oh, I need to serve liquor till later, I will be profitable, whatever. So I feel like our angle might just be to like make it explicit, like on our website, that like, if you want a liquor license, be cooperative.
Other comments? You're on.
Yeah, I like what Zoe was saying. I mean, I understand what folks are saying on this, but the reality is, it's like if the law were changed and it were you have to go to the community board, we don't have the human power to actually process the application. So, like it would, So I don't know. I mean, I think you got to be careful what you wish for. So I like what Zona is saying. I don't know if it's exactly a website, but if we have concerns about this, I think finding a way to broadcast those concerns and encouraging applicants to engage with us and say, here are the things we're going to be looking at, and just, I think all of that is great and we can totally pursue that.
Thanks, Ron. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is, if that's the case, then maybe the procedure shouldn't be that we recommend or look at applications, but we take feedback and then I think step back, the concern would be they're looking for approval to say, look, they got approval from the community board, but they're looking for a rubber stamp, and it's fine. Like, I get it, look at a procedure, we can't look at everything, and then certainly we're advisory, but instead of like setting up a system where this rush to get a rubber stamp and then, wait to cancel, what's, if you're just looking for this as kind of a professionally, us to vote or to give you no comment, like, why don't you just take the no comment and keep, like, there's a point where it's, what advisory are we doing if we're not, like, there's nothing wrong with not having to use us in the affirmative, right? Like, there is not an issue with the no comment. It's one of the first things they address, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And if the system's kind of built around like, hey, we want, the goal of this is to, get these things going as forward, that's fine. There's no problem with that. But then, why bother going through the motions of approval procedure? Or to look influential if it's, at the end of the day, it's just, in the interest of the city as it's written to just prove them. There's nothing wrong with that, and I understand advisory, but then let's not put up the motion of doing it, right? Like, we'll just go with, all right, everything's a no comment, so you can move forward. And then, unless there's real feedback. And that way you're not saying like, oh, we approve. It's like, no, we said no comment, because seems to be where it's going. And, if you don't want feedback, the feedback we're going to give you is neutral feedback. So you can't come around and say like, oh, no, we got like, the board said. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
they want it to move fast, but they also want, it seems, and once again, there's different motives, but it seems like they want the community board approval without having to go through the hoops for a community board approval, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'll give a lowdown about like sort of what the situation is right now. Todd, did you have another comment before I do? Or is your
Yeah.
hand up from?
All I want to say, all I have to add to the conversation is the way the mechanism is supposed to work. I'm sure if we were to ask the DOT bureaucrats as to why they're not going to do any of these things, is because they feel that the community board's influence is to whisper into the ear of the city council members and have them, shoot it down, because there are provisions in the law that allow us to comment, and the city council members in theory could look at it and throw sand into the gears. But the practical reality is that almost never happens, right? So it's a defense that is at odds with our learned experience of many years of doing this due diligence. So, our advisory role and our impact, which reflects what we hear and our experience and seeing whether or not a given outdoor cafe is going to cause problems, is to me, it's a mystery. When we were talking with them, we tried to get them to see that it was in their interest to let us do our job as effectively as possible. Anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, I think you and Tom kind of touched upon this question of sort of like, what is our role in this process? So, Yaron had brought up sort of the issues that have been plaguing us lately, which is really that our role really seems to be, first of all, like noticing the community, seeing if there are any comments, and then second of all, actually checking the application, which actually has not been accurate. There have been a handful of applications where, things are not accurately represented on the map. And yeah, we received one application where there wasn't even a site plan attached. So, I think it really, is a question of like, what is DOT doing? What do they expect us to do? How can we be helpful and not just be like that rubber stamp? And then even in regard to that community outreach process, we've, since the first application received on April 9th of last year, we've received 90 dining out applications. We generally receive like anywhere between like 1 to 8 each week, which is itself difficult to manage. But of all these 90 applications, some of which are, going through the noticing process right now, but we generally actually don't receive that many comments. A handful have received maybe like 1 or 2. They generally have to do with like the applicant's past behavior or just being against dining out in general. And there was only that one application that we heard, if you guys remember, like back in September, next to the hotel. that really garnered a lot of negative feedback. And for that one, you know, we passed it on to the council member's office, and from what I understand, it's still passed. I don't know, we don't know what work the council member's office did on that one after we passed it on, but it's still passed. So yeah, it's, you know, a lot of this, again, given like the 30 to 40 day deadline, it's like a huge burden on us to have to process all the paperwork. Thank you to everyone who's like gone out and like posted last minute when the applicant doesn't do it. Which is like another question as to, you know, like we want the applicant to work with us, to cooperate with us. But at the same time, we don't want there to be a reason why we don't, you know, approve or give no comment on their application. So yeah, there's a lot of work being done and like not that much payoff, it seems. So I think to the question of like, you know, Josh mentioned that I guess DOT is arranging a meeting where community board members can attend. You know, is that something we want to put something together to present at that meeting, like all our concerns to have and to be able to voice at that meeting? Do we want to write a letter like from us as CB5, or is something that is maybe like, you know, we can reach out to the other community boards and see if we can go in jointly on. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts in terms of like the best way forward. Catherine.
So I do have a mix of comments and questions and
Yeah,
clarification.
please go ahead.
So the clarification is DOT does notify us of applicants in our district,
Correct.
right? So that takes the onus off. So if we compare this to SLAP or cannabis, that is a step up, because usually when you're compelling an applicant to notify the community board, it's because the agency itself is not notifying the community board. So we do have communication that the applicant will be applying in our district. And so I say that to say, given the scale of applicants, combined with this is a new approach that we want to make sure that we're doing what we can do within our capacity to do. My understanding is also that, is it our responsibility to post, or is it DOT's responsibility to post the application? Do they do a separate posting? Because that's what the legislation that pointed to, that DOT would be posting public notices.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think that this is what Josh was alluding to in his presentation.
Right.
where- So DOT has their own hearing. So even like regardless of what we say, especially if it's a roadway application, it automatically goes to a hearing. So that hearing, they notice. They will, put it, where do they
So
put
it
it?
seems
Like,
like there's
city
some,
record.
Yeah.
and-
it seems like there's some opportunity in that process, because it's the same with SLA. They notice when they're hearing
correct,
applications.
when they,
And
their
we
own,
notice as
Mhm.
well.
well,
but-
we notice for our own
Right,
collection of comments.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, right, I just wanted to bring to the attention that for me, that we do get notice of the applications is important from DOT, that we know that that is data for us to work with, and that gives us some part of the process, but I'm not so sure that I'm not so sure that whether or not an applicant comes to us is as significant as we have sort of a sense of what's necessary to do versus given the scale. So I wouldn't think we have to hear every application. That's what I'm alluding to. But what is the metric? What is the set of what is the set of parameters that make us want to hear an application?
Yeah, I mean, so far, again, what we've been doing is noticing the community to see if there are any
Right.
comments. And we've only heard one where there were like 30 comments.
Right.
Everything else, again, we haven't received any, maybe at most like 2. Sometimes they're positive even.
And also
Which is
keep
great, but
in mind that this is a layered process in
Yeah.
which many agencies are involved. I'm still not quite sure. I always think of dining out as including public spaces and why isn't public spaces involved in this process, but that's another conversation. But that there are multi-layered agencies involved in this process, and so that doesn't mean that our due diligence is necessarily required in a way that we would hold. What I'm getting at is that it would overburden us, given that there are people paid every day, all day to do this work.
Well, we are reviewing every application though, that we receive.
But not because they came to us, because DOT gave it.
So the process, so unlike liquor
that's-
and cannabis, it's not like we just get a notice and then we have to
Right.
reach out to the applicant.
Right.
In this case, the applicant went to DOT, like submitted an application, and then DOT, after looking at it,
Deemed it.
deemed it ready for us to review
There you
whether
go.
whether or
So
not
it's a bit,
complete or
that was
not.
my point. Only, I think, Josh, and I want to just say out loud, you did a great job of summarizing the meeting and bringing to us what we need to do to discuss this further. That was what I was trying to say, is that this process is a little bit different in that DOT gets the applications and sends them to us. So the applicant is not necessarily required, because we get everything that an applicant was sent to us. So we're not reviewing the applications from the application review. We're viewing the application from what DOT has sent us, and that's a little different.
Although it turns out that there are inaccuracies in it,
Oh,
so
yeah, well, that's
our,
another,
yeah,
okay.
which is, a question of, should that really be our responsibility, like to know the exact sort of clearances that the program requires and be the ones responsible for calling that out, and asking the applicant to change it.
Okay.
Yeah, so. Any other comments about what we should do next?
So when we get inconsistencies, do we notify DOT and the applicant that this application needs X, Y, and Z?
We typically have been working with the applicant, so we'll say, like, hey, there's a fire hydrant here that you didn't account for that needs like a
Right, okay.
5 or 15-foot clearance.
Okay, thank you.
Or you're missing your site plan, can you please send it to us so we can review your application? So.
Thank you.
I have one thing I want to say. This came up in my conversations with some of the other community boards, but the idea behind the legislation originally as to the accuracy of the measurements and the plans as submitted, they specifically designed the application so that applicants, to ease the process and the cost of applying, would not have to use a professional architect or somebody that could create scale drawings. So they themselves, so in other words, you have a lot of smaller establishments or even some bigger ones that you talk about measurements, right? Like Janice, when you and I have gone out, like we bring our ruler with us. And that is, you talk about rules, right? The rules and the law are designed in such a way that they don't make it, they're not really requiring very much of the applicant to actually send them information. And the only way DOT would come out and check it is if they went after the fact because there was some kind of a problem and then issued a summons. So it's put on us to then bring these things to, as you just said, to the establishment's attention that, they're out of compliance or this or that. And it's just, to me, a flaw in the law, right? And one of the things that came up is the DOT, to the extent that they have any plan at all, a site plan, right? Or if the Department of Buildings has a site plan, send it to us so that when we do our due diligence, because I think the Department of Buildings sometimes has site plans of the sidewalks and the buildings that are to scale. it would just make things so much easier for us. If because ultimately, we're the ones who are having to check this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things that can be improved, but on that note, I mean, does the committee, what do you think is like the best way forward? Do we want to explore writing a letter, or do we want to just prepare, for that upcoming meeting, whenever it might be? You're on?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think if there's a meeting for community board members, we should collect thoughts from these folks, and some representative of us can go to that meeting. I don't know that we're prepared for a letter quite yet. That's how I feel.
Libby?
I agree with
Hold on,
your,
Todd.
I agree with your on. I think that kind of sums up and captures that we haven't fully formed.
Should,
Could argue that we should, it's our responsibility to at least make note of these issues that we've come up with and circulate it to our own board members so that they're educated and they're in the loop as these issues develop. I mean, we know enough about the problems and concerns that on our own, we have a lot of new people on our board that are just learning about these issues. I think that something from us to the full board would be advisable. Janice, maybe when you make your monthly presentation, you can give a summary, a fair summary of what happened and the kind of concerns we have, so that when it comes to the full board, people are not flying blind. They're gradually acclimated to these very important issues.
Fair. You have a comment, Bob?
would be appropriate to request like a follow, with the board hopes to have a follow-up, the DOT with council members or community board members, to go over these concerns, and that would be, is that inappropriate to say, we would hope that.
Are you making a motion for a letter?
I mean, it wouldn't be so much requesting it as it would be following up and asking about the meeting that they promised us.
So there's a promised meeting
Yes,
that's just nebulous,
yes.
with a simple letter just confirming the meeting, the opportunity to address our concerns.
I would be in favor of that, to at least, we should definitely follow up with DOT to their follow-up meeting with the board members when they present their one-page paper, right? I mean,
Wait, Todd, I'm gonna let others speak. Zona?
I'm also supportive of the letter to also just inform the full board, and hopefully we can, not spring any surprises on DOT, and then they won't have an excuse to not have answers, so I would be supportive.
Good point.
Any other comments? You're on?
Yeah, I guess I'm just not to me, as Todd recommended, Janice can inform the board when she gives a presentation, and then I don't know that we need to vote on and create a letter that the full board needs to vote to then vote on. Can't just Josh send an email? I don't know. I guess Josh could send an email being hey, we're having this meeting, right? And then we go to the meeting. I just don't know what the letter is doing in this case. Unless do we think that there won't be a meeting?
The meeting's not set.
I like the idea.
Wait, hold on. Wait, yeah, I mean, I guess the issue is that there is no set date, so if we have concerns, we want to compile those concerns. I think it's a question of how we want to deliver those concerns.
Oh, I
is
see.
A letter, or do we want to just
Got
wait?
it. I think we should deliver them in person at the meeting, and that's my opinion. Okay, sorry, I understand.
Okay, Sashi?
I like that idea. I think that sharing the notes that Josh took with the rest of the board makes sense. That could be in a variety of different ways. I think that there are some concerns that were raised in this committee, and there's also varying degrees across the committee of how concerned are we? And our role continues to evolve, and DOT is just keeping us in touch with the things that they're doing as their role continues to firm up with such a new program. So I think that meeting and sharing our meeting with them will be a more productive way of sharing our concerns once we hear from them. How things are going on their end.
Okay, I think either way, we need to come up with a list of what our concerns are. I guess those who were in favor of a letter, is this something that you feel needs to happen in this cycle, or could it happen maybe not? Like, we can take a month to compile everything. And then if this meeting doesn't happen, like Josh can follow up DOT, see if we get the meeting on the books. If they can't get it on the books by a certain time, then we send it as a letter. How do we feel about maybe that idea?
I think I agree with you, Ron.
Hold on, Todd. Hold on. I'm gonna call people in the room first.
I agree as well with Huron. Like, I'm fine for it to not be a letter. We can do it like however we want, do the meeting first. So I'm fine with that, what you described.
Okay, Tom?
What would be like the reasonable expectation for the meeting, the community board members?
We weren't given a specific timeline, but this meeting took place on February 10th, so it's already been almost a month. But there was no expectations given around that.
And the dining out period would be, because it's not an urgent matter, but the issue is it's been a month, you haven't heard anything. And then, you know, we kick it again, so that's another week, plus then another month before we talk. And at that point, the process should, if I'm doing this wrong in my head, please correct me. That would be when you would expect to start getting applications like April, May.
Well, we're constantly receiving applications.
Yeah, but like, I mean, we kind of have to understand the go forward, right? Like, if the concerns are, at the end of the day, they can say like, look, this is the way we're doing it. It's like, all right, so I think that would change the way we would approach the applications. It's really a clarification thing more than anything else, and I do think there's, hey, we need to talk about this, but you know, like, if the urgency isn't there, then I guess the other thing would be like, do we change how we're dealing with applications based on this knowledge? There's no real urgency, but on the same token, you know, there hasn't been any communication in a month about a supposed meeting to sit down and talk. And I do think there's things that need to be understood from it. I don't think this is like crucial. I probably a little bit more emphasis than I meant to. I just say, look, like, doesn't make it sound like, hey, we really don't need to approach this unless there's like comments, problems. But I would want clarification before we get too far into the season, right?
Todd?
I hear my name called.
Did you
Oh,
have a comment?
so I was saying, I agree with you, Ron. It's premature to send a letter at this point. I think that whatever the Department of Transportation, I mean, they've said they're going to do some sort of outreach or opportunity for us to respond, or for them to inform us about what they think our role is. After that, I think that the time would come for a letter to express our concerns. In the meantime, Janice's report to the full board, I thought I heard, we should submit as part of the proceedings for the full board Josh's report, which was an excellent report. I think that if our fellow board members read that, they'll have a very good sense, along with Janice giving the context of just where we stand. And me personally, I have a well-formed opinion of what the DOT is trying to do here, but that's just my own opinion. I think that the full board, with so many new people on it, their opinions have to evolve based on the guidance that we give them. And I think that, you know, there's no rush to get that letter out, right? And certainly sending it out before we meet with the DOT, I think is somewhat premature.
Great. Okay, Catherine, last comment?
Last comment.
Okay.
I agree that there is no rush for a letter and that the due diligence of DOT it's a multi-layered process. They have public hearing processes. There is opportunity for input. when the time is right, and I think we're all still evolving. We haven't even discussed, the quality of life and enforcement parts of this, and so everyone can take a closer look and, I think there's time. I think it's a new process and we give it all space.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like I'm happy to give a report at full board about the status of the dining out program. We can include, I'll mention this report that Josh has produced, and we can provide copies to the full board. And then we can all maybe come up the list of our concerns for the next month or so. Josh, you could follow DOT and really push them on, picking a date for this meeting.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, hopefully we can have that meeting, and then if not, we can revisit the idea of sending a letter. Okay, and then since we're not taking action, we don't need to vote on that concept. Okay, so last but not least on our agenda, we have an update on our research initiative to inform revisions to our cannabis guidelines. So as Brad has mentioned in his chair's report at our past couple of full board meetings, our committee has begun conducting research to help inform our discussions next month about revisions we'd like to make to our cannabis guidelines. For those who are unaware, these revisions are prompted by three main factors. Number one, the fact that our guidelines were based on New York State law, which has since been updated and continues to evolve, meaning our guidelines are somewhat based on outdated laws. Number two, the realization that our guidelines as they stand today are overly restrictive, as they've resulted in our board denying the majority of applications that have come before us strictly based on location and not even in consideration of an applicant's method of operation or other merits. And number three, the reality of how our guidelines are being received by the Office of Cannabis Management and Cannabis Control Board, who have been making decisions based strictly on New York State law with no consideration for our localized concerns. So given this need for reevaluation, members of our committee, specifically David, Milan, Tom, and Yoden, with Catherine and Todd advising, thank you all again, have stepped up to collect and provide research that will allow us to have an informed discussion about the revisions we want to make at our next SLAP meeting on April 2nd. We will also host a public hearing at 6 p.m. prior to the start of our meeting to hear any additional concerns from the public that were not captured in the survey that we've put out, which I'll talk more about in a second. But just so everyone, including the public, knows what we're going after, I'll briefly share the research plan that our group is working off of. So let me share screen really quick. Okay. So the purpose again was to gather information that will allow us as a committee and our board to make informed revisions to our guidelines that will balance the interests of residents, applicants, and the community. The guidelines, as a reminder, are meant to address considerations for retail and on-site consumption licenses specifically. There are other types of licenses. We don't, as a community board, deal with those. That's according to New York State law. But where the law allows us to comment is in regard to time, place, and manner. Time, in regard to hours of operation, place in regard to the location of these cannabis establishments and their distance from places of interest like schools and churches. And then the manner of operation, which refers to things like the odor mitigation, crowd control, et cetera. Okay. The objectives of this was to, of the group is to understand community sentiment around the cannabis operations, which Milan has really taken upon himself to put together this survey, which was launched last week. If you get our newsletter, you'll see it there. I'll also have a QR code at the end that anyone who is watching this recording can access. And we've also had input from Yoden and Josh and Marisa on the survey as well. We also want to understand what the current and proposed state and local legislation for legal businesses are. We have the rest of the group on that. We want to understand the current distribution of legal cannabis dispensaries and sort of the remaining potential for additional dispensaries in the district, given proximity restrictions that exist currently. And then also understand the effect of our current guidelines on how many locations might be allowed within the district. And then, of course, we also want to just look at what other community boards are doing to make sure that we're not doing anything too out of the ordinary. And then in terms of the deliverable that we're hoping to give to you guys, hopefully there will be information in there that will allow us to discuss the following. So in regard to time, sort of like considerations around if the hours are appropriate, if there are situations where more restrictive hours would be more appropriate. In regard to place, sort of any considerations we might want to think about in regard to the rules that exist currently. So, for example, given the 1,000-foot rule, are there sort of considerations that we might want in the picture for allowing another cannabis establishment to be within 1,000-foot radius of another cannabis establishment? Like, I don't know, for example, if it's 950 feet instead of 1,000 feet, maybe we'd be okay with that. The idea of those protected facilities, so the state law allows for, schools and churches. Right now, our cannabis guidelines covers a bunch of other locations, some of which were based on original New York State law, which again has changed. So we want to look at that again. Make sure that if we are going to propose anything additional, that it's truly reflective of what the community wants. As well as like the measurement method, because we talked about this in past meetings. The measurement method doesn't quite make sense in the city where, we are just so dense. There's additional considerations we might want in regard to, places located near residences. Also, it's going to be located within one of our restricted licensing areas, which exists for our liquor licenses, but maybe is applicable here as well. And then anything requiring or requirements regarding their method of operation that we would want them to consider, as well as just the process of them engaging with the community in general. And just as a note, for this discussion, illegal operations, while I think everyone agrees are a huge problem for everyone, are out of scope for this discussion. Because again, the guidelines are really in regard to what we want to consider when looking at legal cannabis applications. This conversation around illegal operations, we're going to want to, I think there's interest in addressing, but we will do that at a separate time. So the timeline, this group had this kickoff on February 5th. We launched a survey last week. And then today's the slot meeting. We're giving this update. The survey will close on March 19th. And then on April 2nd, which is our next slot meeting, we'll have the public hearing, get a presentation of these findings, and then we can talk about what to do next as a committee. So yeah, for anyone online, please take our survey. There's a QR code there. I believe these will also be posted on the Link NYC kiosks around our district, which is cool. And of course, if you're not interested in taking the survey or you have trouble accessing the survey, please feel free to send your comments to our office email or call the office as you would normally. So yeah, that's what we have the group working on. And yeah, I'll open it up for comments and questions. Sachi?
I had a question, the thing that, it sounds like a lot, well, one, thank you for the update, all of this work sounds really great and a lot of work, so just kudos to the task force. So you mentioned the 1,000 foot between two rule, that's the state
That's the
rule.
state rule, yeah.
Are there multiple things that we're thinking about that are actually different than the state rule besides that one?
Yeah, so our current cannabis guidelines, we also have like distances from public parks and like harm reduction facilities.
Things that we have control over within our own guidelines.
That
are
we can
in addition
suggest,
to.
yeah, that we can consider.
Yeah. Control over within our,
Yeah. But all of that is sort of up for, and part of this was part of the presentation in regard to like, what is state law? Like, what is the state going to 100% respect? And then kind of like what we feel is worth advocating for within our district, given like what we hear back from people.
Cool, that's helpful, thanks.
Great.
Laws are.
I have a very silly question, but I wondered if on the Link kiosk survey links, if there was maybe a fun graphic that would encourage people, much like the applied to be on the community board graphics that are up.
I don't know, you're gonna have to
Okay.
ask Josh, but
They're
the tagline that Milan came up with, we'd like your input.
I love that.
So good.
Okay, good.
Tom?
So some of the things with the law is, as they're going through is they're currently changing, right? Like they're adjusting, right? Like there's been feedback and stuff like that. So there's like right now, the big focus is on how they did the funding because, you know, that, there's been a lot of complaints that the funding mechanisms were predatory. That said, some of the laws and some of the guidance is changing as well. There's one right now in terms of in-site, cannabis, like recreation within site usage, which isn't approved anywhere in the city. But, California had just passed a law last year into this year in effect now about that, where they really went deep into, like how that works out, how to protect, the employees within the store, how to do ventilation, you know, what kind of items can be served within the space, as well as the weed for in consumption, and I think because right now there's nothing approved in the city in terms of on-site usage. But they're looking at that and they're using that as a guideline, because right now there aren't any guidelines, so a lot of the stuff. As they have laws like that, there's things and feedback from other pieces of the law that come back and get attached in those laws and motions. So like in the funding one of the funding motions that are still up for vote, it's not law yet, there's like an addendum to the laws, around the hours. And, even though it's really addressing the funding mechanisms, there was an addendum like, oh, for the hours.
Yeah,
This can
yeah,
change.
so this is an example of like research we want to have for the whole
Yeah.
group in terms of like what is currently like, and we want to note like, you know, is this in progress? Is it decided? I think everything is sort of, there's an understanding that things have changed, like all of this is evolving. But sort of like, what are we working with currently? Because right now our guidelines are based off outdated
rules,
laws,
yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, and it's in motion, so there's a lot of room for feedback, but, and like I said, there's 3 laws right now that are currently in motion. And just because they're addressing different issues, it still doesn't mean that they don't take feedback around the cannabis laws and add that in as addendums or pieces of the bill, because they feel like it's still one coherent addressment of the bill itself.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the
Mhm.
cannabis committee.
Any other comments from the committee? Oh, yeah.
Quick question. So this is gonna cover both retail and on-site consumption, it sounds like.
Yes,
Have there been any
On-site?
on-site
no,
licenses?
no,
That's all.
the state is like super behind on that, so,
Alright.
but we wanna be prepared and kind of like, if there are differences, we want to note them.
Got it.
You know, to the extent that we can, this early in the process. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second so I can see the Zoom. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, any questions or comments from the member of the public who's here? Okay, seeing none, yeah, any last comments from anyone about anything tonight? Okay, great, then I think we're done for the night, thank you.